Hello, friends. How's it going? It's Matt. You're listening to episode 139 of the Looking Sideways Action Sports podcast. Blimey, 150 really is approaching soon. Might have to do one of those Instagram polls that have been proving so popular recently over at my @WeLookSideways account to canvass a few options on who'd be a good guest for that milestone. But in the meantime, I'm back with this one, which is with the great Ben Moon, photographer, filmer, writer, and yes, dog owner. So like a lot of people, I first became aware of Ben when his short film Denali was released a few years ago. And since then, I've followed his career with great interest, particularly as in recent years, I've had my own challenges with my own pup, thanks to some health issues he's been going through, and which we spent a couple of years trying to help him overcome. Anyway, I was introduced to Ben by our mutual friend James Joyner after I was a guest on James' 1% for the Planet podcast. Big recommend for that one if you've not checked it out, not just my episode. And me and Ben sat down soon after the US election to record this episode. And this was a really lovely conversation that took its own time and went off in some lovely tangential directions. Of course, we talked a lot about Denali, both dog and film. We also chatted about Ben's career and how that has also evolved in unexpected directions. If you one of the listeners who really enjoys these conversations where people talk about how they ended up with these random careers, I think you'll really like this one. We also found time to discuss the nature of style when it comes to these activities that we all love, the emotional challenges of creating honestly, plenty more themes and subjects that will be familiar to listeners of the show as right up my boulevard. I'll be back at the end for Housekeeping Corner, but in the meantime, here's me and Ben Moon. Enjoy. You know, like obviously I speak to quite a lot of American guests about trying to get them on the show. And I'd say the last like 3 weeks, everybody in the States I've spoken to basically has been pretty distracted about this whole scenario. And even insofar as like the last week, people were just like, do you know what? I think I'm just going to, let's just catch it when it's done. Can't actually focus on anything else. I mean, it was bad enough in the UK. Like, you know, that sort of interim period between the 3rd and then I think it was announced he was president-elect on the Saturday, right?
It was Saturday morning, yeah. I mean,
even here it was dominating the airwaves and, you know, just it was wall to wall. So, yeah, God knows what must have been like over there.
Yeah, my screen time went from, you know, like a reasonable amount up to like 11, 12 hours a day because I could not stop scrolling. I was trying to figure out what was happening, and so I knew that wasn't healthy. So I finally had put down the phone, and one of my musician friends from LA just texted me out of the blue and said they'd called it, and so that was an immense relief. But still a long ways to go and a lot of reparations to do and healing in this country, but hopefully we can get through it. So
yeah. And you're in Oregon, right, on the Oregon coast?
Yeah, I live right across the street from the beach here. Yeah, I can see the ocean from where I'm sitting. So it's a great place. I'm about a little less than a kilometer from the surf break, and I can walk and check the surf in the morning with my dog. And there's a big cape, sand dunes, a lot of sandstone structures, and multiple, you know, a lot of little nooks and crannies to explore in the morning. And so it's nice to have that, especially during, you know, all the COVID stuff and the pandemic and the lockdown, just to be able to walk out and see nature and see that life in fact was going on, in spite of it feeling like it had ground to a halt. So
yeah. And so where are you building a place? Is that right?
I'm recording this from my van, my camper van that I've lived in for the last three and a half years. I've been living on the property. And right now it's been quite a process. I'm building my edit space, studio, as well as the home, and it's just a bigger project than I ever anticipated. So, it's my first time building a home. My dad built the houses we grew up in, but this project was a little bit more elaborate, and just with the pandemic and just living in a more remote area, a little bit smaller town. You know, the contractors are a little bit on coastal time or island time, so to speak. And so, which I love about this area,
Sure.
but it's just taken a lot longer than I expected. And so hopefully I'll be moving in here in the next little bit. And I'm really excited to have an edit space set up again. And I mean, I wrote the book in the van, but everyday life, summertime's fine, but once winter hits and the northwest rains start setting, and it's a lot nicer to be in a house than a camper van. So
what van is it? How big is it?
It's one of the Ford Transits, kind of like the Sprinter. It's comfortable. I mean, I've got everything I need in here, but it's an upgrade from the van I lived in when I was first starting my photography career. So it's pretty cozy.
Yeah, I read the book actually. I read it the other week because I mentioned when we were chatting on email, like I thought, well, should read it really before we chat. Yeah, I didn't realize you wrote it in the van though. How was that? Are you able to just kind of get your head into it anywhere, or are you one of these people that sort of needs to find the right environment so you can kind of concentrate on something like that? Because I've been lucky enough to write a few books, and it definitely requires some concentrated headspace, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I found that the less distractions I had, the better. I wouldn't recommend anyone try to build a house while you're writing a book as well, because there's the decision fatigue from building a house is real. And so that was a distraction often, but there was a lot of periods where I could just tuck away and write. And it was really nice actually when there wasn't much of a structure here yet, because I would just drive down to the beach, park there for the day, go for a walk, surf. I would always be thinking about it, but sometimes I would think about it all day and surf and hang out, and then finally sit down and write. But I had the most beautiful view out the van window while I was writing, and it was really nice to be that in this place too, because it's where I'd spent so much time with Denali, and he spent his last days. And when we made the little short film before he passed, all of that was filmed, within really close to where I was actually writing it. So
right, so you had that kind of nice synchronicity when you were doing the project.
Yeah,
to be able to look at some of the areas you were talking about and kind of tap into that directly.
And also it was just being in the van with my new dog Nori, and really getting to experience a lot of that connection that I felt with Denali, because after the film went crazy online and there was all this attention for it, once I started writing the book and got the book deal, I started I started questioning whether that relationship was as magical as it had all been hyped up to be. It's just like time passes and you start to wonder, is all this effort worth it to write this story? And the more time I spent with Nori, all those little moments I remembered, those moments of connection, and how dogs can be really special in your life. And it's that really helped a lot too, to really remind me of the reasons I was writing, and just helped give me the courage to go in there. And I'd made a few posts also just about the things I'd struggled with health wise, and coming out of cancer and all that stuff, and just reading the responses of those that were just grateful that I was able to share some things that often people don't like to talk about, really helped give me the courage to go there too. And around that time when I was trying to finish the book, I lost a few friends that had also been battling colon cancer and that were pretty young. And that reminded me too that it's really important, even if that's just a small part of the book, to talk about just the dangers of colon cancer and the symptoms and signs, and just to encourage other people to get checked, but also if they've gone through those things, that just to remind them that life isn't over, and you can still fully live with less than ideal circumstances sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's obviously one of the reasons why your stories struck such a chord, I think, with people, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, the awareness thing. I mean, I've actually lost a friend to colon cancer as well, and Yeah, and he was very young. He was like 33, I think, 33, 34, early 30s anyway. And I remember seeing him about 5 years ago. He's Canadian, and I saw him in Jackson Hole actually. And we were snowboarding, and then we went out that night, and he wasn't drinking. And I was like, "Oh, you're off the booze?" He's like, "Yeah, I've got this really bad stomach." He's like, "I think I've got an ulcer," and he said it's been going on for a couple of years, really. I've tried loads of things, and yeah, you know where the story's going. And essentially, like he did, just didn't cross his mind what it could be at all. Just assumed it was because of his age and because of his fitness. So yeah, the awareness thing is obviously just so important, isn't it? Especially when you have these kind of rare cancers that do affect younger people, and that we all sort of feel like we're invincible at that age, don't we? And you just don't even consider it really. And like you say, it's never really talked about that much, is it? So I do think that's one of the reasons why your story has affected people so much. Is that something that you've experienced as well? And generally, as the story's grown and grown.
Yeah, I mean, obviously now there's more research that people are, scientists and doctors are recognizing that colon cancer is affecting younger and younger populations. But, when I first had symptoms, I was only 27, and a friend told me you could have colon cancer, and I looked it up, and the first thing it said was, "Are you over 50?" And so I just kind of blew off the rest of the symptoms, which I definitely had. And, and fortunately I had a friend make me go in that, she saw what I was going through and just kind of kindly and a little bit cunningly got me to go to the doctor. And, she saved my life. And the thing is a lot of my friends have tried to get colonoscopies and, just to be sure if they've had family history. And a lot of times if they're under 40, they're not able to. And you just have to insist on that care. And I'm really grateful that the nurse practitioner I went to see ordered the test, because had I just been put on, some sort of pills, I wouldn't be here. So, because they caught mine right before it went really, really bad. It was,
yeah,
they said it was stage 2, 3, but it, the line between stage 2 and 4 and colon cancer is just, days, weeks, months sometimes. So it spreads really fast. So
I think one of the things that really struck me reading the book as well was like, it was quite a long time, wasn't it, that you had symptoms that you effectively were managing. Like, am I right in thinking it was like almost like a few years, right? Like, it's quite a long period of time where you were effectively having, it seems from reading the book, like increasing lengths to kind of like cope with it.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can justify and deny, whether it's in health or life or relationships. And, when I think it was a solid year and a half, possibly more, from the time I fainted at the fire and saw blood in my stool. And it was like, there were like, definitely, those are pretty stark indicators that something was wrong. But yeah, you can go to a lot of lengths to justify that. Oh, it's just some food allergy, or I ate something, or there was a lot of things I tried to make it so nothing was bad. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but I was in my late 20s. It's like you don't really think that mortality isn't not in your forefront of your mind at that time. So.
And how old are you now?
I'm 45. So I've been out of that. I guess, yeah, they say it's June 2004 was when I was diagnosed. So 16 and a half years since I was diagnosed, but a lot longer since I first had symptoms. So
yeah, it's interesting that you when you mentioned Denali, and it's really interesting thing saying like you wondered if it was real, like that relationship. Was that because the story effectively took on a life of its own? Because before I get you to answer that question as well, one of the things I will say that struck me from the book, which I actually really liked, was your account of making that film about Denali, because it was a really great insight into kind of the reality of creativity in a lot of ways, which is like there was no plan. Like, obviously you were as blindsided as anybody by like how huge that film was, and also it's really interesting to hear like how many iterations it went through to actually get the edit that you got. You know, it was basically like, it sounded like it was quite a, you know, like a natural process that was quite difficult to actually get the piece that you got. And then in the end, when you got the piece, it sounded like you were like, well, at least we've got something which is emotional and which is true, which is kind of what I was trying to achieve. And I just kind of thought, yeah, I mean, that's so true about creativity, isn't it? Because you often when you see things that are really successful, you kind of assume that there's been some, you know, huge master plan. And often, you know, it's that old William Goldman quote, isn't it? You know, no one knows anything. You just kind of do the best work, and then it sort of ends up. So when the story like did hit, and as it did, I mean, as you know, I think I've mentioned to listeners on the show that I was interviewing you, and immediately everyone was like, Denali, that film, I love that film. I guess the question is, did that success, it sounds like it did cause you to question the relationship, the nature of the relationship that you had with Denali then? Was that what you were getting at when you said like, well, actually, was this real?
Well, I think because, I mean, it, like, that film did take on, I feel like once it went crazy online, it kind of took on a life of its own. And, you know, everybody, it's kind of like when a musician releases a song, you know, there's a meaning to them. And I have a lot of friends who are, you know, do that for a living. And when they release something into the world, it's suddenly it's not yours anymore. It's everybody takes their own interpretation of that, you know. And that film was a vignette, you know. It was footage that we captured before he passed, and, you know, some old photos. And, you know, when we set out to do that film, that we didn't really, it was a different piece entirely. It was just kind of a little profile piece for a couple brands, and then we captured a bunch of footage that never got used because it was, you know, just kind of didn't fit the edit that ended up making it. But there was a solid year where I was, you know, multiple edits were attempted, a lot of things were tried, and it just wasn't working right. And, you know, when I brought the footage and everything we had, and had another friend kind of take my story down and brought that to Ben Knight, who ended up, you know, editing it and narrating it. And, you know, there had been a lot of struggle to get to that point, you know, a lot of struggle and a lot of doubt, and a lot of friends and mentors that were just like, just move on. You know, it's not worth it. I know you're grieving your pup, but just, it's not worth, you know, obsessing over this, or it's just time to move on. And that's quite a harsh thing, isn't it? That's quite a brutal thing. It is, but I got it too, because it'd been going on for a while, and I think people just wanted me to, they saw my creativity kind of stuck, you know, they wanted me to like start creating other stuff and stop being, if it wasn't working, it wasn't working. But something wouldn't let me let it go. And I knew that one thing I felt deep down is that in order to make it affect anyone else, it had to be relatable, you know, and it needed to go beyond Denali and I. And there was something that, you know, there's something that kept driving me. I didn't know what it was. And it was kind of definitely a reminder of like, when your intuition tells you something, you know, just keep on that path. And but I think because it got so, you know, the 15-20 million views online, and the, you know, all the people that shared it, and, you know, just all the hubbub, it became almost something else. And in a lot of ways, writing the book was a way for me to kind of reclaim the story for myself. And I needed to tell it in my own words, and I needed to go all the way back and help myself and others like understand why he was so important to me, you know, because the film just kind of touched on the end of his life. You know, it was a cute story told from his perspective, but I felt like I needed to say it in my own words. And And so that, that was a pretty emotional journey. It took 4 years. So
Yeah. Was it, I mean, had you done anything, because obviously your background is photography, film, so were you quite out of your comfort zone to actually take something like that on creatively?
what's funny about writing is it's the simplest form of creativity. You need the least amount of, gear. You just need, you can write it, you can type it, you can say it, and, but it also is one of the most challenging things because it has to come from somewhere else. You can't just, if I'm feeling stuck in photography, I can just walk around with my camera and you can find something interesting to photograph. But when you're writing, you got to just sit down and start typing. And oftentimes it doesn't feel like you're ready, or, there's a lot of things that are frustrating, in that process, and a lot of doubts. And so I had never written anything longer than maybe a 1-page article, other than college papers, and, that actually a lot of that, that account, because it was when I first woke up from the colonoscopy, that was actually included in the book. Yeah, it was an intense process, but I realized that I also needed to go deeper than the film. I needed to go a lot more vulnerable, or it wasn't, I think I was really feeling just kind of over the whole social media thing too, just how everything is curated. And, I was finding myself looking at other people's lives and, thinking, just like anybody, that you're thinking everybody's like got it made, and, just knowing that that's just not real. And I feel like in this era, and especially going through all the challenges of this country's gone through the last, 4 years, it's like, I just felt like it was important to share the real parts of life and what was actually, the struggles, and overcoming those struggles, and how you can get past the things that seem the most challenging.
I mean, you certainly were vulnerable in that book. You talked about a lot of very, very personal things. Obviously, there's the whole story of your illness and treatment, but there's a lot of like super personal relationship stuff in there, and loads of stuff about your childhood and your family, and it's really revealing, really vulnerable. Like, was that how quickly did you realize that was going to be for you an important part of telling the story, to actually go there?
I mean, I threw a lot of things at the, like a lot of the book was written by just little vignettes that I would write about things in the past that would come up. I mean, I had the notes app in my phone was just full of, 10, 20, 30,000 words of just little vignettes, and
yeah,
a lot of experiences I just kind of threw in there and like expanded on them and just started seeing if they would fit. And basically I didn't want to write about anybody else in the book unless that it was really important to the story, and I didn't want to write about experiences unless it brought something to it. And the book does kind of jump around a little bit, but I felt like there was a lot of topics that I really wanted to just touch on. Both was like, mental illness and dealing with, depression and anxiety at a young age, and like, getting past that, and having, how, dealing with health issues and physically, and, struggling to be a creative, and learning how to move past, how to get started, and also get through, all the challenges and doubts that come with that. And just like honestly, the through line for the story is friendship with my dog and with others, and those that keep you going. And the interesting thing is, there was, because the film was popular, there was a lot of interest in it, and, a lot of people, or there was one company or production company that was interested in making a feature film out of it. And I just felt like the short film was a vignette in itself, and if you expanded on that, it just felt pretty meaningless to me. And last winter, I spoke with Max Winkler and Charlie Hunnam, the actor, and about adapting it, and they they saw what I was trying to do with the book. You know, they'd read the book, and it was like a very personal conversation we had, and we connected on a really deep level. And I could see that they understood that it was more, there was a deeper story there about, you know, coming of age, and also just learning how to rebuild your life after a lot of challenging experiences. And so to go even deeper into the story, and, you know, writing the book was challenging. Reading the audiobook and narrating the audiobook was another experience in itself, because I had to read the entire thing word for word, you know, for a week. But then having Max adapt the book into a screenplay, and then reading that, you know, like kind of a fictitious account of what I went through, but also like working with him to capture the emotion of, you know, what it was like to, because that goes way back and goes way deeper, more like the book does. It's not like the film isn't the part that the film mentioned, or the short film is does kind of not even relevant to the book, or to this film adaptation at all. It's more about the deeper early life story of Denali and I. And so that's been quite the process to revisit it again.
That must have been crazy to see that outside, to see somebody take your story again, because, you know, what we're talking about, it's almost a bit of a theme developing there, isn't there? There's like, you know, like how stories evolve and how they evolve from like your experience personally, which is obviously what you lived, into like then how it went out into the world through the original film, and then you've explored it again with the book, and now you're exploring it a fourth time and experiencing it a fourth time with this screenplay. You know, you mentioned the emotion you were trying to capture. Like what would that be? Can you characterize that?
What's as far as
you said, like, yeah, the screenplay, you said we were trying to capture an emotion to sort of, is that something you could sort of,
yeah, I mean,
words?
It's, you know, I can speak in general terms about it without revealing too much, but yeah, it's in it goes back into the early parts of the book, and just shows, you know, just kind of shows why Denali was so important, and then just going through that whole, like, you know, dirtbag life of and trying to, you know, learn how to be a creative. And so a lot of it is about learning how to find yourself again after you've kind of hit rock bottom, you know, when everything seems to like be stripped away from you. Finding your community, finding your creativity, finding the friends that, you know, because Denali I was going through a lot, and dogs often are mirrors of where we are. And so he was a little bit of a challenging pup, you know. He's stubborn, and, you know, loved to wander, and and so, you know, he was a bit of a jerk too. And so I feel like that it's funny to see Max kind of capture him being a little bit of a, you know, a challenge in the story. And you know, that they're really hoping to film in the spring, and we'll see what happens. And, you know, it's like he's mentioned that in the Max and Charlie actually just had a film come out called Jungle Land. It came out yesterday. And in the interviews, Max had mentioned that, you know, they're trying to start production in the spring with this. And with the pandemic and everything, it's more challenging, but because a lot of it is a man and dog outside, you know, it's not as hard. So you don't have it's not like big green screens and studios and
yeah. That's amazing. So it's actually going to happen. So it's been funded, and it will happen.
I mean, everything's, you know, everything in that world. You
can't say that about films.
Yeah. Everything in that world can, you know, it's a miracle when anything actually gets made. And so, but yeah, everybody seems to really like the screenplay, and we're on doing the revisions, and, you know, it's been, the producers attached to it too are really wonderful. You know, a lot of my friends who have worked with them said they're just incredible to work with. They made a couple of films, that are a little smaller indie films, like Little Miss Sunshine, Nebraska, and that one that came out last year, The Peanut Butter Falcon, with
nice,
with Shia LaBeouf, and and
well, all those films manage that really neat trick of telling stories that could be handled really badly you know, if they were in the wrong hands, could be like pretty cringe, but they actually make them, you know, there's almost like an art house element to them at the same time, right? There's almost like that kind of alternative sensibility to those films that, yet still being like massively relatable and kind of touching upon those universal themes, right? Which is, as we know, not that easy to accomplish when you're making films. So yeah, that's cool. It gives it a good ballpark, definitely.
Yeah, and it's rare in that world to just find people that feel really grounded and are all connected, and that feels really good. So, you know, we'll see what happens, but I hope it gets made. So
yeah, one of the other things that I really noticed in the book as well is your descriptions when you were young of like your shyness and sensitivity. You know, it's like a total theme in the book about, and you almost describe it at points as like a physical thing, like, you know, like a tangible thing, like yours, almost like an ability to kind of intuit other people's feelings, and that can affect your own mood. Is that fair to characterize it like that?
yeah, I mean, it took me until, you know, it was, I don't know, five or more years ago. I had a mentor counselor that I was working with that helped me a lot. Actually, she helped me immensely in getting to the point where I had the courage to share the short film. And then, you know I wouldn't have had the courage to write the book had I not kind of gone through some of that personal growth. And she had made me aware, you know, she's like, you know, of the term empath, and when someone is really sensitive and they can feel other people's emotions at times. And it's just being almost like your intuition is a little on hyperdrive, and it actually it can be an immense benefit because, you know, in film and photography, you can kind of see things that others might just miss. And so that's, you know, a huge, you know, that can be a really large benefit in your creative process, but also it can be a handicap in personal relationships because you misinterpret what your feelings are for others people's feelings, and just kind of get swayed too easily. And at one point she said, you're a bit of a shapeshifter. You morph into what other people want you to be, and then by the time you realize where you are, it's already too late. And then it's easy to get resentful and things like that. You know, it's like just in our own, because if we end up somewhere where we didn't really plan to be or didn't actually put the intention behind, it can often it just throws your whole, once you kind of wake up and look around, you're like, wait, how did I get here? I don't want to be here. And so it's been a really great learning process to just decipher my own emotions from others. And the physical part you mentioned is just the palpable feeling of like when someone walks in a room and I know I can actually sense what's going on, and that I just have to be like, that's not mine, you know, leave that there. And but it also, it can make for really incredible connections with friendships and with, you know, relationships as well. So it's one of those things you just have to learn the balance and like see the good and the bad in it.
Yeah, well, I imagine it sounds like that's taken a lot of work to kind of understand it, because, you know, like we can, when you're younger and you're learning to navigate these things anyway, aren't you? You know, relationships, social situations. So that's challenging anyway. But, you know, if you've got like this added layer to it, then I can imagine that will take some work to kind of understand like how it's affecting the relationships that you have, and you know, your own kind of the way that you perceive things as well.
And in general, I mean, society's, you know, tended to glorify, you know, being the tough guy, and and so being, you know, growing up as a sensitive kid and, you know, feeling a lot of emotion, and, you know, having teachers tell me like, boys don't cry, you know, and like things like that, you know, I feel like that's one of the big flaws in how, you know, I feel like the more vulnerable and sensitive men can be, and understanding their own emotions and not just stuffing them, you know, that's the further along as a culture will be. And I feel like lately it's, you know, been more accepted and more talked about, but it's still, you know, especially previous generations, just you know, it's just stuff it and move on. You don't want to actually talk about your feelings. And So learning how to
I think
be expressive, but also just deal with things, not just talk about them, but actually like learn how to deal with them and move on. So
I think that's why it stood out though, because like you say, it's rare. It's pretty to even like read about that aspect of masculinity. Like you just don't read about it. You don't read about like people openly copping to that. You know, even on the simple level, like there's a couple of stories in the book where you're talking about like, you know, being affected when you were an adolescent and crying, like, you know, whatever, like just kind of small incidents in the book. But it did really stand out because it was like, yeah, you don't ever read depictions of masculinity like that. It's extremely. I was trying to think when I was reading it. I was like, I can't even really think of any. Really, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's loads, but you know, nothing. You know what I mean? Like most, when you think about the books that you've read or the films that you've seen, like most tropes, like most aspects of human nature, you can think of characters, you can think of incidents, you can think of things in culture that speak to that. But that is definitely quite rare. Was that so? When you were writing the book and going through this, was a lot of this new to you? Do you know what I mean? Like as you went through it, was there a part of it that was like you were using the creative process to work out some of these questions that you'd already had, or that you might have always had?
yeah, I mean, I remember when I share the same book agent with Tommy Caldwell, the climber who did the Dawn Wall, and
Yeah. It's great, the Dawn Wall. Loved it.
Yeah, and I remember when Tommy, he let me read his book proposal, and he just told me, he's like, man, this will be the best. It's one of the best therapy you've ever experienced. And I, writing the book was, you have to put yourself back in those places, which was both cathartic and extremely painful at times. And I think that's where a lot of the procrastination for writing. It's like I can write about stuff that doesn't involve me, no problem. But when you're trying to write about something deeply personal in a way that feels like it has a reason to be written, and you can gain the insight from it, and it's not just being like, woe is me. And like a lot of the situations I shared in the book were challenging, but they weren't to try to have anybody feel sorry for me. It was because I felt like it gave context of why that relationship with Denali was meaningful, and how low I had to go to get to where I was, came from, or where I got to be later. And so I just feel like a lot of people don't share that and don't share the challenges. They're like, all of a sudden they just seem like they magically appear somewhere and have all the success. Yeah. And it just kind of wanted to show it's not a linear path, and everybody has their own path. And my trajectory towards, I've been doing this, I've been in the creative realm for, pretty much 20 years now. And I didn't have overnight success. It was like a lot of reinventing myself and figuring out what things are. And it's always a struggle. You have to constantly, going, even the most basic transitions that have happened in the creative, realm, with, sorry, my dog. She's like, there's some contractors here working on the drywall. So my dog's like on high alert. But I just, going from film, shooting film when I first started, I was all shooting slide film, to digital, then from which was a big challenge for a lot of people. And I worked with Patagonia for the last 20 years, and their archives had to be switched over, and it used to be, you'd send sheets of slides and they'd go in the vault, and then they had to learn how to, we all had to learn how to manage all the digital assets and becoming our own photo lab. And then, that distinct moment when, Canon put out the 5D Mark II, and everybody suddenly had this filmmaking tool in their hands that, took incredible video, that you could use the lenses that we, instead of just being like shoddy footage, and I'd shot a little bit. I directed one little music video and on really bad cameras and, earlier, but that was a real transition where, in learning how to shoot, become, adept at motion, which is a whole collaboration in itself, that you don't do a film by yourself. You can, but it's so much stronger if you find all the players. And there's so many elements in filmmaking, and that's why it's beautiful. It's the writing, it's the visuals, it's the music, it's the sound design, and there's the edit, and then, you know, the big move to social media, which, you know, suddenly a lot of working pros, you know, had trouble with sharing. I tend not to be an oversharer. I don't post a lot of photos. I'm not like that. But then seeing, you know, a lot of the kind of the influencer generation come up and, you know, become instant, you know, these photographers that picked up a camera and suddenly they had massive followings. It's been a lot of transition just to work through those, and, you know, who knows what's next, you know, but that's
Yeah, right.
I feel like the most important thing with photography and with being creative is, yeah, obviously take inspiration from those around you and those that really inspire you, but always try to find the projects that really light your own fire, you know? And for instance, like my portrait project that it started as just this one type of light that I really enjoyed seeing in the place I was living in Portland. It became something where I could just have, you know, 85 millimeter lens, or I use a 135 sometimes, but just having a simple natural reflected light and just the person's face in black and white, went from this little side project to something that I really truly enjoy. You know, it's a way that I can kind of honor a lot of those who I look up to, and I have hundreds or even thousands of those on backlog that I've shot, and it's something that brings me a lot of joy to, you know, shoot and share those. And when I first posted those on Instagram, I didn't think many people would even, you know, they're like, oh, you're an adventure photographer, why are you posting portraits? And it's become kind of just a part of my creative process, and something that I really look forward to, and has, you know, probably brought more commercial work my way than anything else, you know. In spite, it's just you never know where things are going to take you. And same with this film, it was like, you know, a little bit of, or the Denali film, it was like a little bit of intuition brought it to a place, and then brought the book, and now there's you know, a lot of other opportunities. But you just got to kind of keep following those little hints of intuition, those opportunities, you know. And opportunities don't come at you they're not always super obvious, you know. They might just be these little subtle signs that something might, you know, somebody might mention something, and you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. Or, you know, it's not necessarily like an easy process to bring something to life, but if it feels right, you just got to keep following that thread and seeing where it goes.
Well, I think that's one of the big themes of the book, really. I mean, I get it a lot with this podcast. Like people really like the episodes where they learn about how people got weird careers for themselves. Because obviously, you know, what you do, what I do to a certain extent, like what your peers do, what my peers do, they're not ordinary occupations. And I think people that like always really enjoy those episodes when I put them out. And in the book, it is basically a bit of a classic account of that, as you're describing. You know, like the other thing that sort of struck me as well is, and I've said this before on here, but a lot of it is just like a talent for making a decision, like and making that decision and seeing where it's gonna lead you. And there's definitely a few examples of that in your story, where you've just kind of made decisions, and you obviously didn't really have a clue where it was going to lead you, but you've kind of just effectively like changed up your situation. You know, you've like left jobs and like gone all in on a different path, and like you say, like those are the things that sort of, you know, that cliche, like creating your own look or whatever, like most cliches, there's an element of truth in it, and it definitely comes across from your story, you know, like, and for me, I recognized a lot of the sort of process behind it, and how you were kind of like, you know, like you say, you've been doing it 20 years, you're 45, like you've had to kind of negotiate a lot of different areas of media, and you got to be adaptable. And that's certainly something that comes across in it.
And I think one thing, I mean, I'm on the Sony, one of the Sony artisans for their cameras, and I've had the privilege of meeting some people that I've really looked up to and admired over the years. And David Burnett, who, you know, he's been a press photographer with, you know, several of he's got to be in his, I don't even know how old David is. He's but he was shooting with Bob Marley in the 70s before he was even a big star, you know, and so in Jamaica, and he has a beautiful book, and it's just some of the most phenomenal photos from the Olympics and from past presidents, and always using these, you know, crazy Polaroids and Graflex, just like big, huge lenses with film cameras at Olympic events, and just doing kind of things differently. But one thing that really struck me with David is just being with him at these, you know, events. There's all these influencers running around, and, you know, Sony brings people together in these events they call the condo, just like kind of a big retreat for a week. And he'll just be running around so excited and so curious, and, you know, just showing me what he discovered and putting these old lenses on, you know, Sony cameras, and just seeing how things can work. And just that curiosity that he still has for photography, and the excitement that he still has is I think what's important, because there has to be some fire burning. And I often says, you know, like I always, you know, with younger photographers, you see that hunger that they have and that drive, and something has to be, you know, and that's what brings you to a point of success, because you just won't give up, you know. But you have to have that something that keeps that fire burning, because it's like it can start to feel mundane after a while, just shooting the same things. Or, you know, I've constantly changed kind of direction on where I'm shooting. And, you know, this you know, this year of 2020 with the pandemic and the lockdown, all the, you know, building this house and kind of being not stuck here, but like travel is not easy right now. It's not necessarily the most advised thing to do. And so learning how to kind of be with yourself and being like, what do I really want to do now? You know, I think a lot of people have questioned, you know, their paths in this, and been forced to deal with some things. And it was interesting actually listening to your interview with Alex Yoder. Yoder's one of my really, really dear friends, and I'm just kind of hearing his trajectory too, of what, you know, I've done several projects with him, and we surf together all the time here. And just seeing how he, you know, became a professional snowboarder and has one of the best, you know, I would say one of the most stylish turns in the entire industry. Like I was
definitely got one of the best heel side turns in the game, no doubt about that.
And I mean, honestly, I lived in Bend for a long time, and was, you know, rode at Bachelor and enjoyed snowboarding, and, you know, I had one of the original like snow surf shapes that Burton made years ago, but I kind of was over it, because it just didn't seem that interesting to me anymore. Surfing was much more of a thing. And I rode at one of Jerry Lopez's events, the Big Wave Challenge. I followed, you know, Jerry and all the Gentum Stick crew and Yoder down the mountain once, and just saw and was riding one of their boards, and just I felt like a little kid again, just watching the turns that they were all making. And it's artistry, you know. And I remember one of my friends that I worked with a lot, edited the film with Taro Tamai and Jerry, that Northern Sky, back in the day. And but just seeing the love and the philosophy and the art behind that. But the whole thing with Yoder is just that he's an old soul. And when I first met him on that film tour when he was with Jerry, I knew that. And but seeing how he, you know, his love for curiosity for agriculture and regenerative agriculture brought him to make a coffee company, you know. And I mean, it's phenomenal coffee, you know, the Overview coffee, but it's also just, you know, it seems random for a snowboarder to just suddenly decide he wants to create a coffee brand. So
yeah, well, like you say, it's like we're talking about. It's just the path, isn't it? He's followed his path. You know, he's used everything. He's making decisions. He's used all the things that he's learned, all his experiences, put it into something new. He's taken a chance. He's made a call. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. On the Gentum Stick thing, I think you used artistry as the word. What I really love, this is like just a slight tangent, but what I really love about them is like how unique to their environment it is as well. You know, have you been over to Niseko?
I have not. I've been to Japan, but I have not been to that area, but I know how it's just the stark.
When you ride there, when you ride there, you really understand like where it's all come from. Like not only the boards, obviously, but also like they've got such a particular style of how they snowboard, and you can really understand that it's come from those hills, it's come from that snow, it's come from, you know, all been about like finding a means of expression in that particular environment. And that's just great, isn't it? You know, like, even I was there in January, and some of the local boys were like, when you go snowboarding on a power day, you get a face shot. Someone was saying like, yeah, it's really frowned upon over here, because not frowned upon, but like it's not considered to be that stylish, because, there's so much snow over there that if you're constantly getting face shots, you literally can't see. So what the local boys do is try and pick lines that means they can avoid the face shots, and there's just that nuance of like such a local nuance of like what's considered to be stylish, and that's functional as well, obviously. I just love that. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, because it's, it is something that's just developed from that little environment, which is kind of what all these things fundamentally are sort of supposed to be about, right?
Yeah, and I've seen that with surfing too. I'm really drawn to people who make art in the water, and I've spent a lot of time with longboarders who really inspired me. A couple of the paddock, my friend Belinda Baggs, I used to travel with her a lot. She's an Aussie surfer. Used to live in
she's
Noosa.
got it as well.
And just
this
that
thing that we're talking about.
And when she was with Dane Peterson back in the day, just watching them surf, and now Harrison and some of the guys that were just Groms back then, when I was watching them surf, it was just, obviously the waves are perfect, some of those points, but just seeing that artistry and guys like, Dave Rostovich and spending a lot of time with the Malloy brothers, and, they're all phenomenal surfers, but Dan's like the artist, he's just like watching him carve lines, and now with a lot of the alternative shapes kind of having a resurgence with, new shapers, and, just not necessarily the standard, world tour shortboard. It's more about, different twin fins and setups, and all these old shapes are kind of being revitalized. And, one of my favorite boards is this mid-length egg that it's shaped by Bob Mitzvin, and he's been shaping for 40 plus years, and just it looks like such a simple board, but there's still all these nuances on that, just being able to draw these lines that, just feel really graceful. And I don't know, I love all forms of wave riding too, and it's being influenced by a lot of the guys that do see it as art and see it as an expression is and then Jerry's son Alex, like I've known him since he was a teenager, and seeing him, now he's with Leah, and seeing the how she can ride all the shapes that single fins and these critical waves, and just it's really fun to watch just surfers. And here too, it used to be kind of a bit of a shortboard scene, or a longboard. Now there's a lot of people that are mixing things up, because it there's a lot of just enthusiasm around just having fun in the water, instead of making it so like just very specific styles. Just it's all about having a good time. And
well, as you alluded to with snowboarding as well, like I think that's quite a recent thing that's become part of the whole mainstream culture of snowboarding. Obviously you always had those pockets like we've described, Gentham's one, but again, this like it's kind of followed surfing in a way, this like multi shape snow, surf influenced shapes, and like how the experience you described of like riding one of those Gentham boards for the first time kind of just does open it up as a less one-dimensional experience, let's say, than if you're all riding those kind of twinnies that are just made for freestyle or whatever. That's quite a recent thing. But yeah, I really like that description of style, because it I really like style. You mentioned Dan, you mentioned Belinda, where it's rooted in function as well. It's like it's about the building blocks of getting around in a graceful way, and those maneuvers. Same with climbing as well. Obviously, even more so in climbing. There's a point to them. There's an economy movement. There's the foundation is just great technique. It's a difference between that, isn't there? Somebody like trying to like execute a stylish cutback. Do you know what I mean? Like, which has got no foundation in the technique or the functionality of it. So it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. And you mentioned climbing, because I think that's where I feel like when I started watching a lot of people surf that I really respected, I even took that into climbing, because I was still quite obsessed for, it was a solid 20 years where that was all I thought about was climbing, and surfing was kind of a side side note, and I've, the last 5 years I've kind of flipped the script on that, but um I never liked to just get up a climb. I always liked to just, I wanted to, if I sent something that was, a red pointed something that was really challenging for me, I wanted it to flow. I wanted to truly feel like I don't know, maybe that just felt like I wanted to feel like I deserved to actually get to the top of that climb and not just struggle my way to the top. I wanted to, and there are, if you're in some desert climb, some, really mean traditional climb in Indian Creek or something, and there's no grace to some of that. You're just struggling. There is a beauty in getting to the top of something that you absolutely have to fight through. But in especially sport climbing, to be able to dance up a move that, a week or two prior felt absolutely and utterly impossible, but to be able to flow through that movement. And I the last probably 10 years I climbed steadily, I really tried to make sure I had my movement felt intentional and, have that grace and style. And people always notice, and it's just, it's fun too. It just feels good. It feels good to connect, turn on a snowboard or a surfboard or on a climb and connect those movements and have it feel, it is that flow state, and that flow state can come in physical activities or creativity, but it always feels so much better than just going through it mechanically. And same with relationships too. The people you truly click with and feel like you're exchanging energy when you're spending time with them. It's so much better to live like that than to just have these obligatory, let's go do this and let's talk. There's a feeling there that with, that's just what I try to find in my life, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to say was I've definitely found it through creative work. I've definitely found that through writing, the same feeling completely, whether you characterize it as flow state or whatever, that you described it really well. It's just a unique combination, isn't it, of concentration, focus, elegance, and also I think a big part of it is feeling like you can, for me anyway, feeling like you're actually giving everything of yourself to it. You're actually doing the best. I'm not going to say hardest, because I think that's different for everybody. That's almost like a different sort of can of worms, isn't it? The idea that, there needs to be a particular work ethic behind it. But you know what I mean? The feeling that you're kind of giving everything of yourself to it is equally as important, in each of these endeavors that we're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it is, if we overthink something, and my makeup as a human being is I tend to overthink things. But when you can get into that flow state, it basically is, you're taking everything you've learned over over your life and just shutting off the mind and letting it go, and with writing, if you're trying to force something out, it's never going to happen. But if you can sit down and start to express a feeling, then that words start to flow. And, sometimes I would procrastinate for 8, 9, 10 hours of a day, and then I would sit down and write for 20 minutes, and the few sentences of the paragraph that came out were the ones that would be the keystone for a whole chapter or whatever. It's just sometimes you just need to find that moment of letting go, and a beautiful turn on a surfboard or snowboard or climb and whatever that else feels the same. You're just suddenly not thinking about it, but just doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice point to bring it back to the book. I did like the you were talking about the notes app earlier. I read a great piece recently. I can't remember where it was. It was saying that's, I think I might have talked about this before, and that might be the only last honest bit of digital real estate that we've got left, because it's the one place that you're actually honest. You'll have your shopping list, and then in your case, all the deepest, darkest, most honest things you're going to put in the book. But I guess what I'm interested in is to go from you mentioned it was almost episodic the way that you wrote it, with these getting these little vignettes together, and you've described the process of honesty that you were trying to get to make it ring true. But then to actually put that into a book is a different, like structurally is another challenge entirely. So how did you find that kind of technical challenge, like marshalling all this into something on what is, you know, fairly big scale creatively when you actually come into to put all that into the finished book?
I mean, it was a lot of, you know, a book is a team effort. You know, there's, you know, Mark Bryant was the first editor I worked with to do the proposal. He edited a couple of John Krakauer's books, and John had actually introduced me to him, and he helped me with the process of just getting my story down and coherent in a outline form. But on the actual, you know, my editorial team at Penguin, you know, a lot of thanks goes to Patrick Nolan, who was my editor and now is the deputy publisher there, because he, from the beginning, he was, the books that he referred to, that after he read my proposal and what he, you know, kind of saw in the story in the proposal were, you know, that Matt Haig, who's I believe he's over in the UK. He wrote Reason to Stay Alive, and his latest book was a novel actually called Midnight Library. But he, you know, was very vulnerable with his experience with mental illness, and just, you know, and then another book that Patrick referred to was Dog Medicine, which was a woman who had a dog that basically saved her from her own, you know, issues with the same struggles with depression and things. And so I could tell of all the conversations I'd had with publishers that he was somebody who really cared deeply about the personal side of the story. And, you know, having him and also, you know, the assistant editor and everybody that were involved, like they helped me craft from all these disparate notes and all over the place into something that was a cohesive story, and just were really gentle, but also, you know, like, this is where things need to go. And so your editors are everything in a book. But then I knew that there were a lot of things I'd written about, especially early in the book, that were really, really, really challenging for me to write about, you know, just going back to childhood and, you know, relationships and things. And I was really trying hard not to, like, I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus or like blame anyone for anything they'd done. It was more, I just need to say, hey, this is how I felt in this experience, and this is how I responded to it. And I hired a friend who I'd worked with on a short film where she was very vulnerable with her story. It was for like a dog food brand, but it was about her and her dog and how her dog had kind of helped her through some deep anxiety and things. And so I already knew that I could be vulnerable with her. And so I was able to, like, we had some pretty intensive, so I hired her as kind of my interim editor, and we would have these brainstorm sessions where I would write, and she would tell me what didn't feel quite right, and she went through the entire process with me. And so having that, you know, someone to bounce ideas off of before I sent it to my editors in New York really helped a lot, because it helped me get out of my head and not overthink everything. But also just bounce it off someone who I trusted to be like, hey, is this too personal? Does this feel like I'm blaming, or does this feel, you know, does this need to be in here? And so, yeah, it's a team effort, you know, and like going from all these random thoughts and phrases and fragments and to a coherent book it's a process. So,
yeah, we said 4 years. It's a mission. Well, I got a couple more, if that's all right. I mean, it'd be good to bring it back to Denali, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like, I'm a dog owner. Like, I only got my dog 2.5 years ago. First dog I've ever had. I've been a bit like, why the fuck didn't I get a dog before? But like, you know, not an original observation, but the sort of strength of feeling that you have certainly took me by surprise. And the description of the grief that you felt after he died is really striking. You know, like, it's really, I mean, you know, for me, definitely the day I'm probably dreading the most in the future. Was that challenging to convey that depth of experience?
I think that, you know, there's certain parts of the book that were the easiest to write, you know, they say that the most traumatic experiences are more present because they're actually still living in your body in some ways, and so like the big wave accident and, going through the cancer and things like that were pretty poignant. And like that experience with Denali, like I definitely remembered that process, because when you realize that this being has observed you and been with you for longer than any human relationship, and they're always there, through all the ups and downs, and they don't judge, and they don't, every day is a new day. They're not holding all these resentments, and having that steady friendship, and then having it suddenly feel like it was gone, was intense, and that took me off guard. I mean, it was hard to wrap my head around at first, but writing about it was, it felt really good. And, just getting I didn't have a dog for a couple of years. I think it took me like 2.5 years before I adopted Nori, but I just wanted to make sure it was the right one. And when, it was like, it's like a really good relationship. When they're the right one. And, and feeling that relationship grow and that bond grow is really special. And Nori's 4.5 now, and she's, that's just one of the sweetest ages for a dog. It's just like there's kind of this unspoken, I barely have to say a word. I mean, she doesn't have a leash or a collar on half the time. And, somebody asked me to put her on a leash the other day because I was outside a restaurant grabbing takeout or something, and I couldn't even find the leash because it's been like 6 months since she'd been on one, and so it's just this unspoken, she's so good at being right at your side, and, kind of knows the rhythms that you get into with a pup are really special. And so, congrats, man. It's like, you'll, that feeling of why didn't I do this sooner? It's like, I felt that too. And I got Nora. I was like, I kind of was all that, that's where that doubt came in. It's like, is it really as good as it feels like? And it is, dogs are just great. I mean, I can't imagine having gone through this year without a dog. I mean, when there was literally like lockdown and no human contact.
Definitely. We said that, me and my wife, we said that every day. We were like, I mean, without this would be a very different experience, like, for sure.
Yeah, being able to hug a dog and, it's real. I mean, you get the same rush of, brain chemicals as you do with the human. So, yeah.
Definitely. Well, I guess my final question would be, do you feel that one of the things you said earlier was you were, really trying to capture the essence of the relationship that you had with Denali. So looking back now, do you feel like you've accomplished that?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel, and a lot of that, I've, gotten thousands of, little notes and direct messages on Instagram and things that people have, been able to share that it helped them through their own process and understanding their own process. And I think that was what's been most meaningful, is knowing that I put everything out into that book and just seeing how people have responded to it. And not just the parts with Denali, but I think that's what draws people to it. But then, having readers be like, hey, I've dealt with a lot of the same stuff as you, and I never put a name to it, being, a sensitive kid, or, being slightly anxious or shy, like a lot of things that just don't get talked about, and so it has been really rewarding to feel that, book slowly make its way out there, and being a first time author, it's not that, you don't have the name recognition, so people don't automatically find your book, and so it's been a word of mouth thing, and it's been cool to see it really gradually make its way out into the world. And, people say that, publishing a book is a marathon, not a sprint, it's a long game. And so, I hope people listening read it, and, I'd love to hear what they think. So,
Nice. Thanks, man. So what's planned for today? Because it's morning, obviously, where you are. So you got any waves?
Yeah, I think the ocean's finally settling down today, and it's been pretty stormy, but it's sunny this morning, and I think it's like a 10-foot swell, but the swell is pointed far enough north. I think the Cape's gonna knock it down a little bit, so we'll see. So, and then work on the house. Yeah, it's all good things.
Nice. Well, Ben, I really, really enjoyed that. Thanks for doing it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
So there you go. That was me and Ben Moon, and I hope you enjoyed it. Love these chats where they evolve under their own steam and you find common ground as things develop, which is definitely what was going on there. If you want to find out more about Ben and his work, you can find full links and show notes, including to the Denali short film and his book, over at my website, www.wearelookingsideways.com. You'll also find the full back catalogue, the blogs, all the rest of that huge archive of free content, links if you want to leave reviews, newsletter sign-ups, you can buy merch. You know, go and have a gander, www.wearelookingsideways.com. All right, housekeeping corner. So the rest of them have switched off, just us housekeeping corner regulars still here, I imagine. Very good. So yeah, I've been confined to base somewhat recently as my dog Peg, I alluded to this at the beginning of the show, had another operation last week, which meant he's been pretty incapacitated. Can't remember how much I've chatted about this on air. Definitely chatted about it on Instagram, but basically Peg was born with a condition called elbow dysplasia, which leads to severe arthritis at a very early age. It's basically the thing you don't want your lab cross dog to get. And unfortunately, Peg was diagnosed with that when he was 1. And after a lot of back and forth, because it's really difficult to treat, we ended up being referred to a well-known vet in the UK called Fitzpatrick Referrals, or the Super Vet, because Noel Fitzpatrick, who is the eponymous founder of that practice, not who treated us, that was a great surgeon called James Guthrie, but Noel, yeah, he's the super vet on TV. And if you end up at Fitzpatrick Referrals, the first thing that happens is everyone says to you, Jesus, I hope you had proper insurance for him, which luckily we did. So I would say if you're thinking of getting a dog, definitely get health insurance for your dog, and also definitely tick the box that says lifetime, not annual cover, because that fateful decision, which I had no idea what I was doing, has basically made this much more painless than it would have been, and it's already been quite a mission, to be honest. Anyway, Fitzpatrick Referrals are proper miracle workers. They've helped Peg get back to something close to full movement and mobility by performing a couple of groundbreaking operations on him called a sliding humeral osteotomy. I think that's how you pronounce it. Basically, what happens is they cut the upper leg bone in half and then they reset it using an implant so that the weight rests on the disease-free part of the joint. I mean, it's amazing, really. The difference it made to Peg's life last year when he had his right leg done was incredible. And obviously, we've got really high hopes for how it's going to help now that he's getting his left leg done, which was last week. We've now got a 3-month period where we've got to help him recover from that. He's not allowed to jump or run for 3 months and can only have very short walks a day, which build up gradually. I'm going to say he's a 30 kilo, 2-year-old Labradoodle. So he's not quite getting that message. He literally tried to chase a seagull down the street on 3 legs earlier, which was heartening. But yeah, you got to keep an eye on him. Anyway, I posted the x-rays and more information about all this. So yeah, with that and the book, which I've talked about a lot, and my day job at All Conditions Media and Peg, it's been a busy few weeks. Good job there's fuck all else to do right now, given we're back on lockdown here in the UK. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the episode and want to support what I do, I've not said this for a while, but you could leave me a review, post about it on social, tell a friend, sign up to our newsletter, make a donation through the link on my Instagram bio, buy some merch through the website. Plenty of options, all appreciated. Or just send me an email, podcast@wearelookingsideways.com. They're often my favourite forms of support, because when people take the time to do that, you know that they really mean what they're saying. And I've had some great letters. So thanks if you've been one of those correspondents. All right, I'm back next week. Thanks for listening. Nice one.